a high-tech entrepreneur in Chestnut Hill. And they have 2 daughters, one a physician, the other a TV news producer, and 2 grandchildren, the stars around which their galaxy revolves. Paula, I am honored to welcome you today to Temple Chai Shalom.
I wish I had another hand.
I know.
And another ear. Okay. How's this? Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. So, yeah, it's really weird to hear your life go by. I'm sort of saying, like, who was this person? At any rate, less humorous. Today, as is fitting for Yom HaShoah, we are going to see a Holocaust film. But it's a Holocaust film with a different twist. Most of us know about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, but paradoxically, most people know that it was the largest and most significant uprising of Jews during the Holocaust, but they also believe, therefore, that it was the only uprising. Nothing could be further from the truth. As you will see in this film, Resistance, they fought back. In fact, the Jews fought in ghettos, large and small, in the forests, and even in death camps, where out of 7 uprisings, 6 were led by Jews. I didn't know that when I started making this film, and now I just say to myself, how could I not have known that? I know about the Maccabees from thousands of years ago, but this heroism on the part of Jews facing the most extensive genocide in history that I, a Jew, didn't know about. That's why I made this film. Now, of course, I believe that film should speak for itself, so now let's watch Resistance, They Fought Back, and after the film, I'd be happy to answer any questions or hear any comments that you might have.
in this horrible world, finding even a pen and a piece of paper without being exposed to what they're doing is an incredible breakthrough. And they probably didn't see hope for their own survival. They wanted the world to know.
People have this myth stuck in their heads that the Jews went to their deaths like sheep to the slaughter. But this is where the real story begins.
How could I dare this? Burn the bodies of my brothers in faith. And why didn't I join them and put an end to it? But every time, the thirst for revenge stopped me.
Each prisoner in every squad knew exactly what he was supposed to do and prepared for it.
May those who made an ocean of blood of my people drown in an ocean of blood.
Suddenly, the silence began to wake
in the very beginning, right, once they're crowded into the ghetto, they did resist in the ways that they knew best to do. Resistance that was a type of spiritual resistance. Resistance that was a way of standing up against the German oppressors, feeding the hungry, clothing the poor, taking care of orphans. These were strategies that Jews had used for centuries and which they fell back upon.
The other armed resistance is called the Hebrew Amida. Amida is standing up. Or in Yiddish I would say, Oisgehaltenkeit. I'm not yielding to the situation. Whatever you do that is against the situation is resistance.
Whether you sit or lie, or crawl, or swim, or stand up, makes absolutely no difference. It's Amidah.
Years. It was an illegal life.
If they survive, well then to develop after the war. This was a
And if you always keep in mind that part of what the Germans wanted to do was to kill the body, but also to kill the soul, to undermine humanity, humanity of the individual. And therefore, if you never lost your humanity, then in a very real sense, you're helping to defeat the Germans.
Although you see today pictures mostly from Germans, pictures of Germans had this idea to build a museum for the Jewish people in a world where there are no Jewish people. In order to show the world what a good job the Germans have done in saving the world from these people. Okay? So this is the background. This was the idea. My grandfather, he was one of those people who were chosen to select the materials. And those people, like my grandfather, had decided to rescue.
Right here, right behind, members of the paper brigade had to pass through this gate daily. They had books packed underneath their clothing, under their shirts, under their pants, in their shoes. And they had to pass through body searches of ghetto guards. If they were found to be carrying books on them, it didn't matter if you were carrying books or food or anything, the penalty was the same, death. And many of those books, once they were smuggled into the ghetto successfully, they brought here. Built the ghetto library. Reading was a kind of moral, cultural, spiritual resistance. You're not going to break my humanity. I'm a human being, and reading books is integral to being a human being, and I'm going to do that.
It was absolutely, it was a resistance, and it was as indispensable as bread, I would say. As they say in Hebrew, not only on bread can man live. He needs also something for the spirit. When poetry were created, where people could express themselves, there was a sense of dignity. And I think this was a very important factor that kept the psyche of the
Abba Kovner and Wittgenstein Kovner, Kempner Kovner. My father wanted to be a painter, and he accepted to the Vilna Academy of Painting. He was accepted to this, but he couldn't, the war come, so he couldn't fulfill this dream. But I think he always was kind of a poet. My mother, she opened the pavement. It's Jewish in Poland after the Nazi occupation. They weren't allowed to walk on the pavement. And she walked on the pavement, and then the officer or soldiers, Nazi, came to her and he asked her, "You're Jewish?" And she said, "Yes." "So why you're going on the pavement?" She said, "Why not?" He said, "You're not allowed." And she gave him a splash on his face and continued to walk. So that's some time.
The youth movements played a role in the life of the youngsters at the time. They felt belonging. It wasn't just a place to which you go to be entertained once or twice a week. You lived your life with the members. You lived through them. It's a collective identity of being Jewish. And this explains to you the way they handled themselves during the war.
We had formed our group starting from a precise ideology. Our fight was not for self-preservation. It was not to save myself, to save you, to save the neighbor. It was to fight the Germans.
In a half a year, the Jewish population of Vilna went down from 70,000 to 20,000. More than 2/3 of the Jews of Vilna were killed in half a year, and that's
We were not soldiers. We'd never shot a gun before. We took a pipe, and another boy got the dynamite. It was very primitive.
My mother, she went with 2 other guys for 3 days outside the ghetto because they had to go very far from the ghetto that day. And German wanted to know that the Jewish people did it. That was the most important thing. So she found the best place, but all of the German is not there.
In the morning, we planted the bomb. We took it and we put it under the rail tracks. We escaped very quickly. When the train passed over it too, it exploded. And from far away, we heard the explosion.
She was the hero of the story. Like she was the first one who went outside the ghetto and bombed the German train.
One should never believe that Warsaw and Zona were the only ghettos that rose. Ghettos large and small rose from resistance.
Pretty idea. Sarkast. Faktiski rakieta naša. Ghetto, previše ole. Tajā rudenī Gitnē sēža geto 55. oktobrī. Mēs toreiz geto mēdzam veikt kā divas iespējas. Tevi aizies uz Rumbu, izģērbs kailu, nolikt Petru malā, un tu stāvēs un gaidīs savu rodu. Otra iespēja, tad tāpat tevi došos. Tāpat iesi bojā. Bet tam būs cita nāve. Tam būs jēdzīga nāve, aizstāvot savu tautas godu.
If we discuss how the Nazis reacted to resistance, they thought of Jews being so inferior to them that we use this phrase after the slaughter, we use the Nazi lens. We look at you through Nazi eyes.
When my Grodno. In Grodno, she was supposed to see what's going on with the Jewish community because there were no others, there was no internet.
Each one of us preferred to fall in combat than to be led as sheep to the slaughter. The movement's leadership set up roles with a Gentile appearance would serve as liaison couriers between different locations. I've often gone.
Guns and grenades and so on. This was a very dangerous mission. They also smuggled people out of the ghetto.
Of the cities and towns of Poland. They accept and carry out the most dangerous missions. Nothing stands in their way.
My mother, she was sent to Grodno. I must remind you that again, she was 19 years old. She bought a golden cross and a prayer book, and she pretended to be a Catholic, which meant that every Sunday she went to church and she prayed and she all the time looked what to do. She had no idea. Once remember that these couriers why were they waiting for her? Was longer. She was very courageous and very sure of the three couriers. And this fell into the hands of the Gestapo.
People in the station looked at me with pity, but they'd take my heart. I knew that my chances were gone, that at any moment the Germans were likely to kill me.
Soldiers, open bone, they threw her into an isolation cell. For 6 weeks, she was in darkness all alone. But she kept her Polish identity. The Gestapo did not suspect that she's a Jew.
The Germans were masters of deceit. This would be better. But here, at the Umschlagplatz, the Jews were loaded onto trains, deported to the death camp of
Gave 3 kilograms of bread and 1 kilogram of marmalade to everyone who voluntarily registered for deportation. Do you have any idea what bread meant at that time in the ghetto? Because if you don't, you will never understand how thousands of people who voluntarily come for the bread.
There is this diary that someone is meeting a father who is walking towards Umschlagplatz with his children. And he's asking, why are you doing that? Why are you obeying the Germans' orders? And the man says, well, they took my wife already. I have nothing to give the kids to eat. They will starve to death here in the ghetto. What can I do? I prefer going. So it's really choiceless choices.
The Nazis were single-minded about killing off children with as much cruelty as possible, as early as possible.
Janusz Korczak, the leader of the orphanage who went with his orphans to Tripoli. He was offered the opportunity to survive. Korczak was the equivalent of Mr. Roger. I'm going to say that he went like sheep to the slaughter. I'm going to say the teachers that stayed with their students, the doctors that stayed with their patients, the mothers that stayed with them. Or did they take care of those they were responsible to unto their last breath?
Those children didn't have anybody else to take care of them. The Jewish children, during the Holocaust, visit this horrible victim. And the fact that somebody is walking with them until the end, even when it's a bitter end, this is something that has
so yearn to still be on the other side, back in the ghetto together with my old friends and comrades. I wonder if I will ever see any of them again.
It was the eve of Passover. That's one of the things I remember her talking about, is standing by the window that saw into the ghetto. She spoke of watching and of wanting to be in there and of feeling like she had been ordered not to.
Sporadic gunfire erupted in the ghetto. Powerful detonations made the earth tremble. The battle had begun.
The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was the first day of Passover. Think about it. They went to fight the Germans with a taste of matzah still in their mouths. And there was matzah made in the ghetto.
Battle groups barricaded at the four corners of the street opened concentric fire on them. German dead soon littered the street. The glorious SS, therefore, called tanks into action. The first, not a single German left this area alive. Something has happened beyond our wildest dreams. The Germans had to flee from the ghetto twice. The dream of my life has become a reality. I have lived to see Jewish self-defense in the ghetto in all of its greatness and splendor.
Couriers crisscrossed the ghetto to warn the Jews. Do not allow yourselves to be taken.
The vast majority of the population had no access to arms, but they identified with the resistance and they refused to hand themselves over to the Germans. It was not a passive resistance, it was an active, unarmed resistance. And that is, after all, a matter of some 55,000 to 60,000 people.
The Jews are hiding. The Jews are hiding, and the Germans don't succeed in finding Jews.
And reflect. There are so many forms of resistance. The courageous ghetto fighters firing their pistols. The mother trying to save her baby. Family remains. These too are forms of resistance.
Very sure the Germans understand that the military power that they have is of those Jews who are staying in their houses and bunkers despite everything. And this is when the Germans decide to fight the Jews with a weapon of fire. And they start to set the ghetto on fire.
Dom po domu jest podpalany. Bunkier okazał się bardzo bezpieczny. Nie zawalił się, ale ziemia, którą był obsypany, została tak rozgrzana do czerwoności. Jedno wielkie piekło. I tak trwało przez jakiś czas, dopóki bunkier troszkę nie ostygły. Nam się zawalił miejsce tam, gdzie były te zapasy tak zwane. I zostaliśmy właściwie bez
Warsaw
around us. I felt very, very proud. There was great camaraderie at the camp. We were unhappy because so many members of our families had been massacred. But we were happy because we were free and we were fighting back.
Tuvia Belsky was responsible for saving 1,200 people's lives. He accepted everybody, small children, old men and women, solitary women who couldn't fight like you and kill 100 Germans.
Bielski did something completely different philosophy of
The Volga had approximately somewhere in the neighborhood of 925,000 Jews being killed. Some 300 people revolted in Treblinka and escaped. In the end, there were less than 100 survivors, and they would have never known anything about Treblinka, or at least not from the perspective of the victims. We could only know the statistics from the perspective of the perpetrators.
There were 7 rebellions in the death camps. 6 of them were led by Jews, 1 by the Russians. So actually, even if you only consider violent resistance, the Jews looked pretty good.
I'm born in Poland in Sobibor, 1927. I was a little boy in the village. It was 8, 9 good homes. And then when they started to bring in the trade, I don't know exactly how many a day or week, but we could hear the screams and we could smell the body. There was rain every day, but we didn't have nowhere to go. And Saturday, around 3 o'clock, and the after to the train. There's no place to go. Living in the train, and I contacted them, and my father and my mother all got together next to the little opening to the window up. And the cabin train, the little windows. They ripped off the wires and they jumped out while the train was going, and I jumped out just because of the summer after that.
Nazi commanders, Nazi officials who were working in the camp into a place where they could be slaughtered one by one.
The plan was at 4 o'clock. The electric wire was cut. The telephone wire was cut. Everybody has to kill his SS man and his guard at his place of work. And it started working.
They then stormed the gates, and then they went into the woods.
This was before decided in case anything goes wrong. Everybody on his own. Maybe one will survive and will be able to tell the world.
really know what motivates what he puts into his life. Other than he wants to tell a story, he wants to see revenge, and that becomes a more compelling notion than giving up and getting out of the fight.
Each prisoner in every squad knew exactly what he was supposed to do and prepared for it. My job was to set fire to the crematorium building while I worked.
The Jews had brought knives to the camp to make kiddush. Their original purpose was to slice the challah. They had the words L'Shabbat Kodesh, for the Holy Sabbath, engraved on them. By homing them on all four sides. We produced homemade mines and hand grenades. We took metal cans of food, filled them with explosives, and put in fuses.
Between Auschwitz and Birkenau, there was a big Golgotha. She was a whole amount of gunpowder. She did not hesitate for a second. My mother was born in Poland. Her name was Ada, maiden name Neuf. She was one of the slave laborers at the factory. Smuggling itself wasn't easy because they had the body searched on exit from the factory and then on entry to the camp. My mother told me that she hid it inside the shoe, and once in camp, she would hand it over to someone else and then bring it to Robota. So Robota would then take it and deliver it to her friend from the Sonderkommando.
Our commando men from crematorium 4. We knew what that meant. They were going.
In the distance, we now see billows of smoke burning. The second crematorium is burning.
The destruction of crematorium 4, this is a big achievement. It will never function anymore again.
A revolution, an uprising at the crematorium.
This is perhaps the single most important site for the understanding of Jewish resistance during the Holocaust. In the most improbable place, at Auschwitz.
Monkey State. The uprising came to its young, Jewish, courageous, brave men.
Sure. No, just, let me just take your questions.
It's not a question, it's a statement. This is real, I never said it isn't real. But this is real. This is the truth. This is what you must believe. Don't let anybody tell you differently.
Thank you, Ira.
This is the absolute truth. I've seen so many movies about this and read so many books about this. This is
I started a project like this. In 2016, I was still working for the PBS Nova series, and we were making a film with Professor Freund, whom you saw in this film, and his group of geoarchaeologists who use high technology equipment to better understand the Holocaust. But because they're digging in Holocaust sites where there are bodies buried all over the place, they can't actually dig. So they have to use high technology and electronic equipment to see what's under the ground. We were in a place where there was rumored to be an escape tunnel. 80 Jews had been brought in. The Germans were losing the war. They knew it, and they wanted to get rid of the evidence. So they brought in a group of 80 Jews that remained in the countryside, in prisons, et cetera, and their job was to exhume and burn the bodies. They knew that when their horrible work was done, they would be the last victims, so they dug an escape tunnel. And on the last night of Passover, they used that tunnel to escape. 12 succeeded in making it out of Panari. The rest were shot. I happened to be, the tunnel had only been rumored to exist. No one knew it, but they weren't talking for a whole bunch of political reasons, which we can get into, why Holocaust victims didn't really talk about their experience until much later after the Holocaust. And this group of geoarchaeologists actually proved the existence of the tunnel. They had the evidence. And I was there when that happened, about the moment of discovery. But I was only there once before for when anything was discovered. I left Nova in 2019. All that time, I kept thinking, I never heard of that tunnel. How come? Or any other tunnel, or any other example of Jewish resistance during the Holocaust, except for the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Why? Is that because it didn't happen? Or is there some other reason? So I started to research it, and Professor Freund is the kind of person that when he wants you to do something, you just kind of do it. And he said to me, well, you need to make a film about this. When I left Nova in 2019, he pushed me hesitant about it because it meant I raised a lot of money for Nova, but I had a huge infrastructure, a big station, the largest station in the whole system, to help me. And here I was kind of alone. But this turned out to be a story that resistance during the Holocaust, which has not been told, and which many people believe didn't happen. So I really started to think about it, and the money, I went to foundations and to individuals, and the money came in, and we were able to make the film. And in researching it, it just turned out there were so many examples. You can make 100 films like this, and you would have no problem in finding amazing stories, because it was widespread, it was prevalent. Jewish resistance happened in most of the 1,200 ghettos, whether they had weapons or they didn't have weapons. And I find the most amazing thing to me is in death camps, where they knew they weren't going to survive. They still had uprisings. So it turned out to be an amazing story, and that's kind of how it got started. It got started with the Nova that made me start questioning and then doing research on this. And of course, I didn't do it alone. It takes a village to make a film. And my partner, my co-director, Kirk Wolfinger, and my partners from Lone Wolf Media were extremely helpful. And amazingly, with the one exception, none of them were Jewish, but I would say they were just as involved in this story and just as committed to telling it as I am. So that was something that, first of all, with journalists, if there's a story that people don't know, it's like catnip. I mean, you just have to tell it. And, but these stories were so amazing and so heartening. And then, of course, as a woman, the role of Jewish women as purriers, which, again, until now, there's a book that came out by Judy Battalion, but, a few years ago, I'd never heard about that. So it's very rich information. I hope other people will make other films about it in different ghettos. We can only go to Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and then Israel because that's all that time and money allowed. But it happened in every country. One of the reasons why we wanted to emphasize Marcel Najari, a Greek Jew who was a Sephardic Jew, is that people think that the Holocaust only happened to Ashkenazi Jews. But that's not true at all. In Greece, the Germans were merciless, and the Germans fought, and the Jews fought, and they had military backgrounds. So they actually knew how to fight and had weapons. That's an amazing story, which we weren't really able to tell. So there are many, many stories that remain untold.
Art and to speak and and live through it. How do you find them?
Well, so I start with reading. And when you read, there are lots of stories there are many, many published books that include resistance. Unfortunately, those books, they're kind of in the scholarly archive, and they don't necessarily reach the general public. But that's how I start. I start with reading, and then I call the scholars. And, it was interesting because this was all during COVID. And that was really, in a way, very fortunate for me because nobody was really doing anything. And so Zoom interviews with the scholars, and the scholars generally knew the survivors, and they knew something that's new in this film is that the survivors' children are now taking up like Steve Mead you saw in Yoel Ya'ari, telling the story of Vladka Mead and Bella Hazan. They're now taking up the mantle of, as the survivors' numbers dwindle, they're taking up the mantle of telling their people, keep calling. And then as you're thinking about the film, you start paring it down because, as I said, they're kind of a big story. So you can't start telling stories about Greece and France and all these places where there are fascinating examples of Jewish resistance. So then you start, as you go out and talk to more people, you also start to pare it down as you decide what story you really want to tell. So it's kind of a process. It's not original to me. Everybody pretty much is making. Mm-hmm. Right.
Any thoughts on taking some of the stories in your documentary and are there any certain promotions or highlight or spotlight that more dramatic? Because that actually reaches more mainstream.
Well,
you mentioned
right.
telling these stories and while documentaries and people who are educated now.
Yes, I mean, if I had millions of dollars and I weren't 78 years old, what I do now is, for example, the story. And Professor Ya'ari, her son, it's really interesting. He and his sister knew nothing as kind of just another Jewish mother. I mean, they were raised in Israel. In Israel in the 50s, no one told their stories. No survivors told their stories. Politically speaking, in Israel, it was very unpopular to be a survivor. It's very sad. People regarded you with suspicion, like, what did you do to survive? It's used to make a contrast between party settler in Israel working the land with their hands, and they were very unfairly treated. People called them soaps. And so Bella never spoke about what she had done. She wrote, while she was still in Europe before emigrating to Israel, she wrote 2 notebooks which were in the Ghetto Museum archive. And her son and daughter discovered those archives, those notebooks, in the 90s. And it kind of revealed to them a whole new person that was their mother. And he's a neuroscientist, and he decided to devote the rest of his working career writing a book, which has been published in Israel and got amazing reviews, and hopefully it'll be translated. He's already translated into English, and it'll be published here. It would make an amazing film. I mean, just that story of the photograph, to me, is just, you go to a party of the Gestapo, that these young girls could fake it and be so convincing, and at the same time be spying on the Gestapo and use the materials that they got to save Jewish lives. So it's an amazing, but it is, even Defiance, which, if you haven't seen Defiance, fantastic, and it's on Netflix, I think. Wherever it is, find it, because it's great. It took Roland Tech, it's based on a book by the scholar at the University of Connecticut, Nechama Tech, who just died almost at age 100. It took them 9 years to get the money. So it's really hard. It's very hard. The story of the Paper Brigade, David Fishman, who's a scholar in the film from JTS, wrote a book called The Book Smugglers. It's fantastic, and it reads like an adventure story. Fantastic film potential. Yeah, I would love to do it if I were, 40 years younger and, want to live in Hollywood and et cetera, et cetera. But I hope somebody will do it because, one of the problems is that Professor Patrick Henry, his book was actually, but he studied and got involved in Jewish resistance in France. And he edited a book where, and in his foreword, he talks about this problem but they're almost all about Gentiles rescuing the filmography. And even from a lot of the books that are published, you would question, why did 6 million die? There were all these Gentiles rescuing Jews. Well, it was rare. It was rare. It happened, but it was rare. Much more prevalent was Jews rescuing Jews. And yet, even Yad Vashem doesn't recognize that. They have their righteous Gentiles, which is wonderful, and they should be recognized, but not which both Bella have been awarded posthumously. So, yeah, it'd be great.
I was curious about the archival video footage. I don't know if you know this. I think at one point it was identified as like not sitting. I'm just curious, prisoners or resistance, how much it seemed like it was shot by prisoners, some of it.
Yeah, there really was most of the footage in this is shot by Germans. I think that would have been kind of a shocker if they were sitting there. So I don't know what they were doing. One of the hardest tasks in this film is to go through all that archive. We had an archival producer. Her name is Lisa Goodfellow. She's amazing. I mean, she looked at hundreds of hours. And this footage is much of it. Found it extremely upsetting. She looked through to really try to find just the right shots that will make the story work. And then we had Professor Michael Berenbaum, who's really teaches at the American Jewish University, which is a seminary in Los Angeles. He went through the film 3 times to make sure there was the food shot, but he did. So, but we don't want to identify something as Warsaw that's really large, and we don't know what these look like. So that was a very big part of putting the film together. Okay, thank you very much. You're a great audience.